Good morning, everyone. My name is Jonathan Fritz, and I'm the Chief Innovation Officer for Chime. It's my pleasure to welcome everyone to today's Chime Innovation Beyond the Edge. This is the beginning of our third season of Innovation Beyond the Edge. In the first two seasons, we had 22 sessions, hearing from great thought leaders, including Heather Nelson, John Halamka, Ryan Smith, Dan Barchi, Sarah Vaezi, Tanya Townsend, Scott Powder, Mark Probst, Sarah Richardson, Shafiq Rob, and many others. All of those sessions are available on demand through the Chime website. We highly encourage that you check them out. Innovation Beyond the Edge is designed to share creative problem solving and highlight innovation successes implemented by your peers. I'm very excited to hear from a couple of friends and fellow Wisconsinites today. Craig Shedler, the Managing Director, Northwestern Mutual Future Ventures, and Mike Anderes, the Chief Digital Officer at Freighter Health and President of Inception Health, Freighter's innovation arm. Their two organizations teamed up on a reverse pitch competition, and we look forward to hearing about it. If you are listening live or on demand and you'd like to present in one of these sessions, please reach out to me directly. I'd love to hear from you. We know you're incredibly busy at this time, so we appreciate you joining us today. Quickly, why is Chime presenting this series? Quite frankly, change presents challenges and problems, but it also presents opportunity. Opportunity for creative problem solving that can create value. We want to highlight creative problem solving and innovation successes by you and share it with your peers and share it throughout the entire Chime community. So if you give me a second, got to run through a little bit of boilerplate here. Before we get started with the presentation, I would like to cover a few details. Our session will have three main parts. One, presentation from our speakers. Two, Q&A with our speakers, and three, optional virtual roundtable session of 4 to 6 people so everyone can have a candid discussion on the topic presented. We'll have everyone muted during the session. Questions for Mike and Craig can be posed directly to me in the chat function during their presentation. I'll ask the questions in the order they were received. Also, we are recording this presentation. This will be saved and stored on the Chime site. You can go back and review any details once we finish. Discussions within the breakout rooms will not be recorded. The roundtable discussions are optional but highly encouraged, so please stick around. If you have difficulty listening to the live audio stream through your computer speakers, keep in mind you can connect to audio via phone. If you need help with that or any other technical detail, please use the chat window to send us your questions. Lastly, by attending today's full session, the presentation and virtual roundtable discussions, you will earn 1 continuing education unit for CHCIO, CFCHE, and CHISL certifications. We will review the attendee list following this session and distribute CEUs accordingly. With that said, I'm going to hand it over to Philip Furukawa, the Director of Sales for ClearSense, to introduce our speakers for today. ClearSense has been an excellent friend of Chime, and we really appreciate their support as one of our Innovation Beyond the Edge series supporters. Thank you once again to ClearSense and Philip. Philip, please take it away.
Hey, thanks, Jonathan. And it's an honor to be here. And we enjoy the opportunity to sponsor Chime and partner with Chime. So again, I'm Philip Furukawa, Director of Sales here at ClearSense. And my role is to help organizations make better use of their data through the use of our platform. ClearSense is a data platform as a service, explicitly architected for healthcare. And our platform enables healthcare organizations to leverage enterprise data assets more effectively through an agnostic approach and the use of novel technologies to eliminate data bottlenecks and increase efficiencies in producing analytics. Today, you'll hear from Mike Anderes, Chief Innovation and Digital Officer of Freighter Health, and Craig Shedler, Managing Director of Northwestern Mutual Ventures, on how they've partnered to run a successful reverse pitch competition. You'll hear why the reverse pitch competition was created, how the two organizations partnered, and what the results were. Thank you for joining us for what's sure to be an intriguing discussion. Mike, Craig, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks, Philip, for the introduction, and thanks, Jonathan, for having us here today. what I want to do is give a little bit of the context and background behind Reverse Pitch, why we did it, and why we're really excited to partner with Mike and the Freighter Health System team to accomplish this in 2020. So next slide. I'll just very quickly, Northwestern Mutual. So we are not in the healthcare industry. We're a financial services firm. We're the largest life insurance company in the United States, and we're also a large investment house focused on providing our clients with both investment and insurance products that meet their financial needs. So we come at this from maybe a little bit different perspective, but I think a lot of what I'm going to talk about is universal and really addresses a lot of the issues from an innovation perspective that you all are dealing with within your respective organizations. So next slide, please. So what is reverse pitch? I'll sort of start fundamentally. Reverse pitch is something that Northwestern Mutual initially began in 2017. And so we've got a little bit of experience with these. What it really is an opportunity for us and me and my team to work with our organization to figure out where are pressing business problems that we haven't found internal solutions to. Where have me and my venture investing team surveyed the startup landscape and not found a solution either? And where can we put the problem out to the entrepreneurial ecosystem and see if there are others that have innovative solutions that they've either developed already or potentially are willing to form a business around and start a business that would solve our problem. We also believe would solve a problem on behalf of a lot of other organizations. So is that sort of like the foundational aspect of it? What we really want to do, as I said, to source these solutions for challenges. So we've identified a problem, we haven't been able to solve it, and how could we potentially leverage a new startup, a new organization that's going to be formed with our support to solve that problem. And for us, it was also important to look at this as something initially when we founded it that would build the entrepreneurial ecosystem in southeastern Wisconsin. So, how else could we support startups, support entrepreneurs looking for problems to solve as part of their work and see if they could then address the problems on our behalf. Next slide, please. So how did we structure this? This is really structured as a competition. So we pitched out our problems and ultimately waited to receive answers and to see who would pitch back to us and who would be interested. So for the winning team, we provided a $10,000 prize that really allowed them to sort of get themselves established, to sort of get the foundational groundwork laid out, and then eligible for up to $90,000 of seed capital of seed investment from my venture fund through our Cream City fund, which is affiliated with our fund. And we provide them that initial seed funding to develop a proof of concept, to develop sort of that initial product that we could test and learn and see if they had solved a problem and then would build a scalable solution beyond that. We had some other organizations also provide support, including a local law firm, which provided some legal support, again, to help with entity formation, sort of with the very initial work of getting a company formed. We offered co-working space. We have an innovation lab within our campus in downtown Milwaukee. So we offered that up as well. But I think most importantly, what we were able to provide is real mentorship and access. So for a founding team, what can be most important in many cases is how do you find that first customer, which is what we wanted to be, to help solve the problem that we pitched out. But then also providing access to our network, potentially to other financial services firms that could be customers, just more broadly to a number of subject matter experts across our network and across the Northwestern Mutual enterprise to help them succeed. Next slide, please. So again, just on the background, so we've done this twice before. We had two previous winners, one company called Social Leads, and we've had success with both of them in terms of addressing the problem that we pitched out. So the first was Social Leads in 2017 that created a machine learning platform focused on helping our financial advisors leverage their social networks as part of prospecting and part of client engagement. We've had good success with it. So it solved a problem for us and our advisors. They've gone on to do pilots and have commercial arrangements with a number of other large financial institutions, and they've raised $5 million in venture funding. Our 2018 winner, we took a slightly different approach with Pythonic Ai. It's a platform focused on helping our underwriters understand and review records that come in as part of a life insurance application much faster. and again, been a big win for us on the enterprise side, really solving a problem and helping us reduce our costs. They've signed an agreement with us. They're in production. They're also working with a couple other financial services firms and looking at other verticals in insurance and financial services more broadly. So I think with the results of the first two, we've seen success, and we think we've found a way to really deliver solutions to our organization while helping build businesses. Next slide, please. And so just a little bit of the timeline of how this works. And I think Mike's going to talk a little bit about the support and everything that you need that goes into these, but these do take a lot of time and effort to pull off and really to be successful. So this is sort of the timeline for the event. Northwestern Mutual and Freighter Health pitched out the problems in November. There's a lot of work that goes into developing those problems that are pitched out. There's a lot of support that goes into the entrepreneurs that have questions around them. So then in January, we had 12 applicants that applied to pitch back. From those, we selected 5. From that, then in March, we undertook judging to determine the winner. And then we selected our winner in April and have begun work with a company called Is on the problem that we pitched out for 2020. Next slide. So this is, again, given we're a financial services firm, these tend to be a little more geared to financial services, but here was the 2 problems that we pitched out for the 2020 challenge. Our first is around attracting diverse talent. As we look to grow our organization, we have about 7,000 employees, primarily in southeastern Wisconsin. And as we look to grow our employee population, attracting diverse talent is something that we're very focused on. So we pitched that out, having looked at the market and not seen a solution that we thought really met the needs that the need that we had, and the need that we believed other organizations were facing as well. That was our first challenge. Our second challenge was around imagining your financial future and looking at the future of how the next generation of consumers really thinks about their financial lives and doing that in a different way. So those are the 2 problems that we selected from a number of challenges that we surveyed from across our organization. Next slide. So how to judge, I think this is something that's important, sort of how we came up with 5 criteria. Does the product address the challenge that we pose? Does this actually address the need that we have? But also thinking it from an investment perspective, is there a real business here? Is this something that would just solve a problem specific to us? Is this scalable? Does this solve a problem beyond just specifically what Northwestern Mutual is looking for? Competitive positioning, how would this compare to other solutions that may be tangentially related? How would it compete? The team, we think, at this stage, team's really important to be able to execute. And lastly, in some ways, most importantly, preparedness for next steps. How are they going to build this? What's their plan? How would it potentially integrate to solve our problem? What's sort of the feasibility, sort of thinking broadly about, how would this work going forward, and how feasible is it? How soon could it be in production? What is the development process going to look like? And last slide. And so from our process, we picked a winner from the 2020 challenge. It was a company called Is. Is is developing a solution around increasing the diversity of talent. And we've had a number of discussions with them already around their product, where the application is within our business. And we think, given the success and sort of the process that we have from the first 2 challenges that we did, we're really optimistic that Is will meet the challenge that we have and continue to grow its business as well. So I think, having been through this, there's a lot of learnings that come from it. And I know Mike's going to go into more detail on that. But I think for overall, the biggest learning for us has been that to do this effectively, it takes a whole organization. You really need a lot of buy-in from various stakeholders. And I think that's been the biggest learning we've had, having done this 3 times now. And I think we've really proven that you can, if you're willing to open up some problems that you have and say, here's challenges that we're facing. And if you're willing to be open and some level of transparency behind the curtain to help entrepreneurs really understand that problem and develop solutions. We've been really impressed over the years with many of the applicants, in addition to the winners, We think this has really been a way to boost our innovation program and really help us address problems across our business. So I'll stop there and look forward to answering any questions that you have.
And this is Mike Andrews. I think we can kind of go, I think, to the next slide. I'll kind of talk about the healthcare, sort of like drill down a little bit more sort of maybe specific way we approach this. But, you know, one thing to know is we're completely drafting off of Craig and his team who have done this for a few years. This was our first year. So we basically just tried to learn from them. So I'm going to share a little bit more of like the, you know, how we try to focus on this from a sort of health institution specific lens, but all the principles that Craig shared are pretty similar. So if you go to the next slide, I'll give you a little background on Freighter and the medical college. If you're not familiar with it, you know, there's the obligatory statistics. I think one thing, you know, to note about Freighter that is a little bit different than some other organizations is that we invested relatively heavily about 6 years ago in resources for this broader digital transformation. And we thought about that, you know, from a governance perspective, a sort of partnership and network perspective. And what we're talking about with this reverse pitch is really consistent with that network approach and how do we bring sort of the best outside ideas into the organization. And Inception Health is sort of that vehicle that we created 6 years ago to lead a lot of that work. So so I'm kind of coming to this, you know, discussion wearing a couple hats, you know, the president of that organization, you know, and have been with it since its beginning. And then also the chief digital officer for the health system, where we're trying to kind of receive a lot of this external innovation. So that's sort of Freighter in a very sort of quick kind of run through. If you go to the next slide, what you're going to see is very redundant from what Craig shared, and that was essentially, you know, how does a reverse pitch really work? And so I'm not going to go through these, you know, any more than to just say that they are really sort of cut and paste from them, because we were really just trying to draft off of their experience. But if you go to the next slide, we talk a little bit about how did we think about this from a, you know, what problems are we trying to solve and what are we trying to put out into the market? And this is where we had to do a fair amount of work internally to really sort of identify where are we going to, you know, where we think there's meaningful work that we could do, that there's not already competing internal efforts for, or very sort of viable market solutions. And these are the two challenges that we came up with in that sort of discernment process. Now we put two challenges out because this is a competition. We only signaled that we would select one winner. So we were kind of also hedging here, where we could basically pick one winner, you know, that we felt did the best job, you know, between these two solutions or these two challenge statements. You know, the first one, you know, is one that we thought was a very broad, you know, challenge that is emerging as a bigger and bigger sort of problem that health systems are going to have to work through if we're going to be on the hook for population health and you know, risk-based payments. And that was that of sort of social isolation and its impact on health. I think, you know, the kind of simple statement here is that, you know, if you have significant social isolation, it's equivalent of smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. I think that's sort of the level of impact it has on health. So we thought this is a big challenge. We, as a healthcare provider, don't really have a lot of insight into how we'll solve it. So let's put this out as a challenge. And then the other one really kind of came from the sort of initial wave of managing through the pandemic with, you know, we basically forced everybody into a pretty digital world, whether they wanted to be there or not. And we realized, you know, pretty quickly that a fair amount of our patient population wasn't ready for that. So we were looking for ways that we could help really just make that a lot easier for that patient population. And if you're ever interested, you can always actually see that we produced some videos, of these challenges that really highlighted for whoever was going to be entering into this competition, like what we were looking for, how we defined the problem, so that they could then be much more targeted with their submission. And those videos, I think, are still available if you ever want to see them. So if you go to the next slide, one of the biggest, sort of, I'd say, benefits of running one of these reverse pitches is you have this mandate to get the word out about, what is this challenge? What are the benefits of participating, so that you get a lot of interest and therefore a bigger pool to kind of pick from for winners. So the dual benefit here is that you're also getting the word out about your organization's focus on innovation, and in our case, pretty heavy digital focus, both locally, which you'll see, on the screen. We use a lot of our local channels to try to get this word out, but also nationally, because these solution companies or people who are entrepreneurs that might have an idea how to solve this problem don't have to be from Milwaukee to participate. So we used a lot of our social networks and other sort of tools to get the word out nationally. This helps build our brand, in the local market. When we're talking about local talent that we're looking for in this innovation and engineering, digital engineering space, it helps build that story that we're serious about this and we're willing to invest in it. So that's one thing to think about. This is obviously, there's a cost to doing this marketing, but it has dual benefits. If you go to the next slide, we felt pretty good. We must have picked some pretty interesting problems to solve, because we had over 40 teams apply for those 2 challenges we put out there. We went through a discernment process with our subject matter expert teams and whittled that down to 12. And then ultimately 6 finalists that had this, sort of pitch competition for our judging panel. Our judging panel for this was strategically designed to have some people outside of Freighter at the medical college on it, a couple local venture capital leaders and other thought leaders in the sort of local region, so that they also were sort of brought into our network as we were approaching this. And they, because of their various expertise, really, helped discern what might be better winning solutions than others. So once we got through that sort of initial pitch, we actually chose, if you go to the next slide, to, before I go to the winners, this is sort of a quick sort of look at the teams, and I'm not putting these up here so the names or anything like that, that we identified as we were identifying these challenges, because at least from our organization's perspective, they had to be the ones to really get into the weeds about what is the problem we're trying to solve, define sort of what a good solution looks like. And this is the team that if we pick a winner in this space, they're going to have to catch the ball and kind of keep, working with that team for the next year. So this group that we formed early on, there's sort of a commitment implicit in that if they say this is a problem that they want to solve, that they're going to be working, with whoever the winner is for the foreseeable future. So this is the group that was the social isolation group. But if you notice, because we had 2 channels or 2 challenges on the next slide, we had 2 teams of these subject matter experts that would be, again, kind of catching whoever the winner was. So now if you go to the next slide, I think I have sort of who the 2 winners. We actually chose in the end that we didn't want to pick just one winner. We had the same structure that Northwestern Mutual used around what do winners get. Our ultimate winner was an organization called Lena. It actually happened to be from, at the time they were in Texas. So this was not a local organization that won. And they will be given sort of the same sort of benefits for winning that Northwestern Mutual is giving their winning team. But we had a local organization called Time Slips that we were just really enamored with where they were trying to go, but they were not as polished, they were earlier. And so we still wanted to support them. And so in this case, we just opted to give them sort of an initial prize, but maybe more importantly, give them support from our expert teams and through Inception Health to continue to develop their model. We just took out the piece where they were going to also be able to earn an investment. And then finally, one of the kind of 6 that we just said wasn't a winner.
While that's coming up.
If you go back to the slide right before this, perfect, yeah. We did also, because when we brought some of the judges together, one of the companies, we thought, hey, this could still be a good partnership. This is an organization that we may not want to kind of bring in and help, develop, but we might want to be a customer of it. And that's how we kind of dealt with even a third. So out of the 6 that were in the finals, we're actually working with 3. So we felt like that was at this point, a success. So if you go to the next slide. There, yeah, this is sort of, I think, the final sort of summary that I think Craig and I share. I think, the view here on many of these learnings, make sure you have organizational support for the area you're trying to work in. Because I think it's not really going to do the startup company or the entrepreneur any sort of service to win, but then kind of run into kind of a brick wall within your organization. We, as I share with the teams, like, make sure that you're kind of defining the team and the space before you put the challenge out into the public, so that that there's somebody to catch it on the back end. And then what I don't think we quite realized when we started this was how much work went into this. It looks easy from the outside, and it sounds like, oh, this is it's going to be fun. It's a competition. But there was a lot of work that went in behind the scenes that my team worked on for the freighter side, and obviously Northwestern Mutual helped us with from their learnings before. But every organization that entered, we had to engage with them. There was this sort of ongoing discernment process, and then in the end, when those winners were sort of announced after the competition, we're still, what we would argue, is either at the end of the first quarter or at the 20-yard line. We still have, a year or more work ahead of us with these winners, that if we're gonna get value out of this, we have to put that work in. And if we want to continue to build our reputation that we are an organization that you want to work with, if you're an early stage company, then we need to help make them successful. So that's a sort of, that's the point we're at right now. We don't have years of experience to kind of say how this is going to turn out, but it has been something that I think you don't want to take lightly if you're going to, think about going down this path of a reverse pitch. So I think that's sort of the end of the kind of prepared remarks that we had. So, John, I'll kind of turn it over to you if there's any questions you want to pose or discussion.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Craig and Mike. I really appreciate it. I do have a few questions to kind of kick us off here. One is maybe Craig, starting with you, and then Mike, maybe you can chime in as well. But can you talk maybe a little bit more granular detail of the selection of the problems? I know you've touched on that, but obviously it takes a lot of involvement internally to identify what those problems are, kind of bubble them up to the surface, if you will, and then to really commit to this whole process. But maybe going in a little bit more detail of kind of the selection process of the problems that you were putting forth for the reverse pitch competition.
Yeah, I could talk a little bit about our process. Obviously, identifying the challenge that you're going to pitch is foundational. If you don't have good challenges, like everything else we talked about, doesn't really matter in a sense. In that, I would say, in our experience, that takes a lot of work and effort. We have our innovation team that is sort of tied into various business units across Northwestern Mutual. and they're always in discussion about things that they're working on, things they haven't found solutions for. Me and my team directly on the venture investing side are seeing startups that we're investing in and that we're introducing to various business partners that address problems that they're looking at. But that's a lot of time. It's really developing relationships with a lot of key stakeholders, talking to them on an ongoing basis. And even when what we found in certain cases is we found a problem or we found a challenge, but team says, I'd love to participate, we don't have time, or come back to me next year, that kind of thing, when maybe we can free up resources. So it's not only the challenge, but it's also the time and resources to put behind it. So that really is foundational. I think it's super important to do that, but it really is, it's developing relationships, it's understanding that, and then from the series of potential challenges you have, to kind of rack and stack them, work with various leaders and say, all right, what do we think are the most pressing and the most opportunity?
And we took I think a controlled approach the first year to defining them by basically using this network of some senior leaders in our organization to basically do a call, like what are the big problems that you see being important to solve? And then we used a sort of a scoring grid, to kind of try to, categorize them, put like sort of where do we have internal resources and expertise that we can lend to that problem? Where are we certain we don't have competing, sort of initiatives already in place and so on. And that ended up for us out of maybe 20 different problems with those top two that we didn't do a full call like to the entire organization, hey, send us your problems. We kept it a little bit more narrow so we could make sure they're really strategic problems, and then we did a sort of a scoring grid to identify the top two.
Yeah, and one other thing I would add would just be that you have to have a sense of openness to sharing your problems with, this is public in a sense that you're sharing some problem with the broader community. And I think not only being able to share that problem, but also entrepreneurs are going to want enough insight to know how to solve the problem. So we prepared, and I know Frederick did as well, Mike's team did, like you have to provide not only the problem, but enough like understanding of it so that founders who are really smart can go away for a couple months and develop a solution. Then there's back and forth on that. But I think there is also that need to feel a sense, I don't know if vulnerability is the right word, but just sort of openness to sharing out a problem. They say, look, we can't solve this. We haven't solved it. Here's what we've tried and hasn't worked. And being willing to do that, I think, is important because the entrepreneurs need that background to be able to really come back with a good solution.
So another thing to actually question and think about, love your each of your thoughts on this, but the resources involved. The idea of presenting problems and essentially having somebody else pitch solutions to them to help solve them sounds wonderful. It sounds great, but the amount of internal resources, and I'm also assuming financial resources that have to be brought to bear, are not insignificant. And it's not as if you can just add on to some of your team members' plates to say, here, you've got more responsibilities. So can you talk about some of the challenges maybe that you faced and some of the resource maybe additions and how you were able to get those approved, if you will? And so maybe, Mike, I saw you smiling there. Maybe you can start off.
I'll say this, we're lucky that we were able, again, to kind of draft off of Northwestern a bit, because there's sort of a template then, like this is basically what we think we're going to spend on marketing. This is sort of the timeline involved, and here's who we need to have from a project management perspective. So we did absorb it in our team. Like we tapped somebody on the shoulder and said, hey, one of your roles is to develop a network, a local network. So this is going to be how you're going to spend some of your time for the next 6 months. And that individual then coordinated everything, so that is not an insignificant amount of time. Like we didn't hire anybody new to do it, but we did carve out time for that individual. From a budgetary perspective, you obviously can, it's pretty easy to budget the winnings. Like, like there's a very defined sort of prize at the end of this, but What's a little harder is to budget all right, how much am I going to have to pull from my marketing team or other, parts of the organization getting ready and getting this out? That from a cost perspective, I don't think was too material, but from a time perspective was not insignificant. And then, this idea of pulling resources from within the organization around these expert teams to really, we had to define the problem. They had to meet, they had to make videos of what this problem actually is. And while that cost is not much in the, hiring somebody to shoot a video type, sort of sense, their time is valuable. So that's something that we didn't budget for it, but we had to use our goodwill, sort of within the organization to get people to agree. And then now on the back end, it's like much less financially intensive to support these teams, but it is time. We already had the physical space like Northwestern Mutual has. We already have, sort of the resources to give the team to work within our organization, but we still have to pull people's time. And I think in the end for us, time is the hardest resource to find.
Yeah, I would echo everything Mike just said. It really is the time commitment. Within our innovation team, we have someone who's now done this a couple times, so we have some some knowledge that's built up on how to do it and gotten a little bit more efficient. I hope we shared most of that with Freighter, so they learned from what we did the first couple times that didn't work. But yeah, I think there is that element of you getting the buy-in, your subject matter experts who are in critical to this, getting their time and commitment is important on the front end as you're developing the challenges, but then also once you pick the winner to working with them. And hopefully though, I mean, the value proposition that we've always provided to the teams that were the sponsor of the winner ultimately is, look, you said this was a problem, we're helping solve a problem. So there's alignment there. So you should want to do this, understanding that it is a lot of work, but we're solving a problem here. So that's always been pretty compelling, is like, yeah, this is clearly an issue and, we can't solve it. So let's develop a way to solve it.
Excellent. In the selection of the panel of experts that for each of you, can you talk a little bit about the strategy involved of who you selected? Was part of the strategy for bringing ambassadors of sorts, those that that can support the program, not only bringing their expertise but also kind of champions internal within the organization? And maybe Craig, you could start, and then Mike.
Yeah, I think developing that roster of experts and structuring that group is very important. The way we approached it is who knows the most about this problem and who can provide the most depth of expertise, and also be willing to talk with these teams either while they're developing their response or post selection as winner, to spend time with them as they continue to develop it, refine it, and ultimately pilot with us and hopefully move it to a real commercial relationship with us. So that is that key element of who knows the most about this and who can really speak the language that a founder needs to speak to, and sort of have that connection so that they can develop the best solution possible.
We did a little bit of a mixture of, first, like who in the organization has a business kind of accountability to solve this problem, or would ultimately, because some of these we're picking are kind of, their future problems, like loneliness. That's not, we don't have anybody who's like got a business responsibility to solve that today, but there are people who have business responsibilities to solve population health and, sort of, I'd say, overall management of total cost of care. So we had a component of that. We had a component of the actual sort of deep expert, kind of that was involved with each panel. We had some up and coming people within the organization that wanted to try something new, and this was part of their leadership development. And then we had some people who were very just sort of embedded in the inception process. So they understood how to work with startups and how to kind of, basically bring all those pieces together, sort of like the business accountability, the deep expertise, and then just sort of the overall project management of it. So that's, if you look at the panels we have, that's how you can start to bucket who we had on each of these teams. We definitely wanted to stay away from just pure expert, like panel only, because then you, at least in our mind, you tend to then lose the business impetus to actually solve the problem. You maybe write a great paper about it, but these are startup companies that we need to kind of support. So that was sort of our first crack at this, and we'll see if we have to adjust as we kind of move through.
Mhm. So one question from our audience is, each organization is investing capital into this process, financial capital into this process. Why not invest that same capital into just hiring internally to address these problems?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I think philosophically, we believe that we can't build everything, and so $90,000 of an investment to get the return on that from solving that problem is going to be greater than what it would cost us to build an internal team or to use internal resources. So we just looked at it from an efficiency perspective, and one sort of given priorities, we sort of have the saying, like, with infinite time and infinite resources, we can build anything. We're a smart organization, but we can't. And so as you prioritize other things where we feel are like so essential, so key strategically, like that's where we're focused. And yes, this is important too. So let's see if we can leverage someone from the outside. We don't believe we need to own this solution ultimately. We want to be a customer of it. We also think other companies will want to be customers of it. So that's the way we look at it, is like, we can't build it. Let's just partner with someone. We'll be an investor. We'll help seed them, and we'll be the first customer.
Yeah, I would say ditto. And then I think the only thing I would add is we, 6 years ago, made a very clear statement that we don't have all the best ideas at Freighter in the medical college. So we have to figure out a way to work with external, organizations that are bringing these solutions. And it's a big difference between taking $90,000 and investing in maybe one FTE, to try to work on something, versus somebody who is basically already starting to build a team around a problem. And that is what they think about when they wake up. It's what they think about when they go to bed. That's their livelihood is based on whether they can solve that problem. You just get very different sort of outputs from that. And so we're going to want to have a portfolio in the end. And I think if we think about health systems now, we think that we basically have to become platforms that have a mixture of kind of homegrown solutions and really easy access to external solutions that serve whatever the mission is of that organization, right? So we can't have it all be just our creation in the end. So this is a way to open that network up a bit and make sure that we have sort of very dedicated people working on these problems that we otherwise wouldn't have the resources internally to prioritize.
Great. Thank you, Greg and Mike. Another question around, once the problem is actually defined, reaching out and I guess getting the message to entrepreneurs, the message to startups that you are engaging in this process, that you have these specific problems and you're going through that process. How did you engage with the startup community, with the entrepreneurial community? And I know Mike and Craig, you've mentioned it's not specific to our state here in Wisconsin or to the Milwaukee region, but how did you engage with those kind of entrepreneurs and startups to attract the talent to come to the program?
Mike, you want to take that?
Yeah, I'll start. We used some of the network that we've already built sort of through inception and sort of through our marketing department to basically try to get the word out through these, I'll say, free informal channels, heavily sort of skewed towards where these organizations might already be engaging around, whether that's, social platforms like LinkedIn or other social media platforms. So we use that. We did sort of dial like basically up or down based on what the in kind of intake was of ideas. So we never got to a place where we felt like we had to spend a lot of money on the marketing because we got that influx of the 40 plus teams in pretty short order. So, in part, there's a machine behind this. In part, there's a reputation that we think we've already sort of developed nationally around, hey, this freighter, they're a good place for startup companies to work. And then there was this, kind of much more explicit, okay, here's the challenge piece. And if all those line up, then I think you'll get a good sort of group of participants. But it is a good question, because one of our fears was, if we're not casting a broad enough net, and we end up working with a winner who has 3 other, more compelling entrepreneurs out in the community already, and they didn't apply, then that's going to be a potentially wasted effort, right? Because we don't want to be, putting a bunch of resources behind something that's not going to win. That hurts both us and that organization. So that was a little bit in the back of our mind, but in that vetting process, when we decided to get down to the top 6, we did, try to apply a lens from some of the tools we use to make sure that the organizations didn't have much more compelling, sort of options out in the market. But that's not so much, I guess, related to the questions asked around how do we actually get that word out, but we use our network and our sort of, I'd say, social media channels as much as we could.
Yeah, and I would say similarly, when we've run this in the past, that's largely what we've done too. It's a little bit of local media, and I think as well as some national, some publications and things that we'd worked with previously. I believe for this year we had at least initial attendees from, I think, 7 states. And so I think we had pretty good reach, at least in the Midwest and a little bit beyond. So I think it is important, obviously, and it's a fair question, because if you put in all the work to develop these challenges and then you get, a very limited response, that's going to limit the success of the event and the program overall. But I think you'd be surprised, like if you get the word out on social and in the right LinkedIn forums and through those means, entrepreneurs will find those. And, we were we tried to be as very inclusive in our outreach and how we approach that. And, we've been happy every time we've done this with the volume of applicants we've received back.
Mm-hmm. And certainly there's also an entrepreneurial and investment community, not only in Milwaukee, but within Wisconsin, that each of you are, I know personally are very plugged into, and, that organ or those communities know about, the work that you're doing. And in fact, I think about, Craig, the social leads, one of your portfolio, or one of the companies, is a portfolio company of Brightstar, which I'm on the investment committee of. And that's another kind of component of the community, if you will, that helps kind of bring in entrepreneurs and venture and other things like that. Switching to another question related to incubators, accelerators, and other kind of resources that might have some facilities. We've got Generator, a top 15 accelerator here in Wisconsin that's expanded very significantly, and they have a kind of an earlier program with G Beta. But maybe Mike, starting with you, and then Craig, thoughts about the engagement with those types of organizations and how that might actually tie into the reverse pitch competition. So incubators, accelerators, and the like.
Yeah, I think for us, it's not an either or. It's a potential sort of network. And what we think, the reason people chose to engage in these competitions, and we think, why they were excited to work with us wasn't because they needed the funding. It was because they'd be embedded in an organization to better, sort of refine their product and sort of develop this sort of data that supports them, going out beyond us. The organizations like Generator and others, they can be really good, I think, around the structure of your startup, the funding, how you maybe get some, sales pipeline built. But unless you have a very strong relationship with one of those through your organization like Freighter or Northwestern Mutual to pull those in, they're still sort of missing that like deep embedding of that organization into whoever their customer would likely be. So I think in our mind, if we're successful with these organizations and they need the support of like a generator, then we would be happy to kind of connect them at that point. There's no pride of ownership or anything for us. We want the company to be successful. We think success looks like you solved the problem that we picked you to solve, and then you're economically viable. And so those are things that, you know, an incubator or other things can actually help with, that maybe we don't at inception or Freighter want to spend a lot of time on. We just want to say, can you solve the problem? So I think it's an and, you know, for us with the local sort of incubator community.
Yeah, I think for us, it's the problems that we've pitched out. We've, you know, my team on the venture side, we talk to 500 plus startups a year. We have relationships with Techstars and Plug and Play and Generator and a lot of the big accelerator programs out there. And for us, we believe that the problems that we pitched out didn't have solutions coming from anybody, including all those great programs that these are sort of untapped markets, or, you know, untapped opportunities. So one of the criteria we did use is to make sure that, you know, there wasn't just a company that came through Techstars, there wasn't just a company that came through Y Combinator or whoever, you know, that we could just use them, because then we would just, you know, look to partner with that organization. So we were very clear that, I think to Mike's point, this is an and, like, we've looked at all those, they weren't providing solutions, so let's look at, you know, creating it or co-creating something.
Excellent, thank you. Another question related a little bit more to kind of the details of the relationship with the entrepreneurs and the startup companies. Maybe Craig, you can handle this first, but the legal documents, the structure, you know, what do you have to have in place to define that relationship between your organization and, you know, what may be, you know, an entrepreneur that hasn't even formed a company yet, or maybe it is already an existing entity?
Yeah, so for the first two winners, neither of those were existing entities. So there was really just a couple of founders that had ideas. And so they had to put an entity in place first and foremost that we could actually, you know, engage with. From the way we've structured it is that there's the investment that we make. So the $90,000 investment it's gated. So there's a series of milestones that are developed in the terms of that investment. So achieve certain milestones, unlock the first 30,000, achieve additional milestones, the next 30, and then additional milestones for the final 30. So that's really sort of the governing document of it, is the investment document that contains the milestones for achievement of objectives, and then you know, unlocking or releasing the next tranche of the investment. In terms of the commercial agreement that we've entered into with our first two winners, my team has actually stayed out of that. Those are 100%, you know, arm's length in negotiations between Northwestern Mutual and the company. But, you know, we sort of separate the two from that perspective. We do have certain rights around first ability to commercialize. So if they develop a product, we have a first right on commercially acceptable terms to both sides. But if they develop something with our help, they can't go and sell to a competitor, basically, is what we're trying to solve for there. But yeah, the investment document, I would say, is sort of the governing document, at least initially, between our company, between Northwestern Mutual and the startup.
Yeah, we stole again and drafted off Northwestern Mutual, and we use the same sort of safe agreement with milestones to unlock that $90,000. And so it's just it's a collaboration. Ultimately, we get to decide what those milestones are, but we do work with the startup to try to make sure that they feel achievable and they're beneficial to them. Like, hey, we want to hit those milestones. This would be work that we would agree would make sense. And so we just finished that work recently of kind of mapping out what does that look like for this first year.
Excellent. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Mike. We only have a few minutes left to ask for, is there any kind of closing comments or things you'd like to address before we close it out? I have a few announcements, but I wanted to keep things going because we had such great questions instead of going into the breakout rooms. But Craig and Mike, if you've got any kind of closing thoughts or ideas you'd want to share, we'd love to hear them.
I would just say, I think the best analogy we've thought about this internally is this looks very much like a duck on the pond. It's very calm on the surface, but there's a whole lot of activity underneath. And I think this does, if you do it well, it does look sort of seamless and easy, but it's a lot of work. But I think in our experience, it's been incredibly rewarding for those involved with it. It really has solved some problems for us. And if you sort of understand what you're signing up for, I think this can be a really great way to accelerate innovation across organizations.
Yeah, I think the why behind this for us is not because we're trying to, hit a home run with some sort of, a unicorn company someday. It's really, it's more at the sort of change management culture sort of level of the organization. So if your organization is interested in trying to push the culture more to an outside in, more sort of accommodative to, some of these not well-baked sort of solutions, then this can really be, I think, a good sort of ingredient that you would put into the mix. It's not a sort of a standalone solution. It's got to be part of a broader, sort of initiative of the organization to be more outside in.
Wonderful. Appreciate it very much, Craig and Mike. Thank you for participating. Thank you for sharing your views and thoughts on the reverse pitch competition and helping our community learn more about innovation. Just a couple of announcements that I've got. Chime Innovation is launching an emerging ventures program next month. So if you're a hospital leader working with any digital health startups, we want to hear from you. Whether you've incubated a new venture, co-created with an outside partner, or invested directly into the venture, we would love to hear from you. So please feel free to reach out to me directly by email, jfritz@chimecentral.org. Also consider registering for our summer forum, which is June 16th and 17th. We'll have an innovation track that I'll be broadcasting live from our Innovation Center at Intermountain Healthcare in Salt Lake City. We also have an innovation course that is launching in a couple of weeks, focused on startups, venture capital, and accelerators. John Banta from the Blue Venture Fund is going to be one of our guest speakers, as well as Darren Dworkin at Cedars-Sinai, focusing on their accelerator, and Dale Bierman, who is a startup founder that sold to United Health Group Ventures. And also mark your calendars, September 23rd and 24th in Chicago. We're going to have a full in-person Chime Innovation Summit. So look forward to getting back together in person with everyone. And then finally, thank you to ClearSense for being a supporter for our Innovation Beyond the Edge program. Mike and Craig, can't thank you enough. So really appreciate your time, and thank you for everyone that joined us today. Be well.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.